welcome everybody. My name is John Anderson, and I'd like to welcome you all to Fish That Tell Stories. This is the first of 5 broadcasts we're going to do called the Suick Seminar Series. Those subsequent episodes will be broadcast on the first Monday of every month. So write it down. Your next one is February 3rd. Hopefully we entertain you and educate you enough tonight that you want to keep attending. The purpose of our series, again, education, entertainment. The more you know, the more you catch. So we hope to teach you about musky behavior, tactics, timing, and presentations. Hopefully resulting in more muskies in your boat this year. Maybe some of the tips that we'll pass on will teach you to take better care of your muskies. You're only as good as the fishery that you're on. Our broadcasts are all interactive. So whatever platform you're on right now, there's a facility for you to ask your questions, to send in your comments. We'll include a number of those during the show, but if we don't get to them, we promise that we'll get to them in the days following our broadcast. At the end of each episode, we're going to inform you of upcoming events in the muskie world. It's a very busy time. It's show season. We'll also tell you about different chapter events for Muskies Canada, and Muskies Incorporated. If you want us to talk about those, send them in. We'll try and include them as well. And at the end of the show, we'll tell you about where you can meet members of the Suick team in person, where we'll be, and how to get a hold of us on social media. Subsequent episodes will include special guests. Our February show, we're having Mike Suick on. Mike's the 4th generation owner of one of the oldest tackle companies in America. We're going to talk about how the company came to be, the development of Suick, and we're also it'll be a presentation specific program. So we're going to tell you how we use Suicks, jerk baits, soft plastics, top waters. If you're not a Suick person, that's okay. It's transferable knowledge. We catch fish on a lot of different lures over the season, but all of us at our heart are Suick lovers. And we'll tell you more about that. You'll learn more about that as we go through this. I guess it's time to tell you about our team. First, I'll be host number 1. My name is John Anderson. I started guiding in the 1970s in a little town, a musky heaven community called Menaki, Ontario, on the Winnipeg River, just north of Kenora. It's on the Lake of the Woods system. I've guided for 9 different species in my life. I'm the owner of the Ottawa River Muskie Factory, Ottawa Fish School, a summer camp for kids that goes on sale tomorrow in Ottawa and will sell out tomorrow morning if you want to be involved, and Muskie Factory Bait Company. I've been a full-time muskie guide since the late 90s, part-time before that. I've been actively involved in Muskies Canada. And one of my favorite things about Muskies Canada is right on our crest, it says sport fishing research. So I've been an educator for 30 years, giving hundreds of presentations here in Canada, the US, and online. I am a very science-based angler. And so hopefully we'll pass on good parts of the science about you. Specifically, I love and have learned and put a lot more fish on my boat from telemetry studies. I love them because it's real data. It's not somebody telling you why they're successful because they catch muskies. It's actual data of fish and fish movement. So we'll pass some of that off to you. When I started guiding in the 70s, there were 2 basic choices out in the boat. There was hair and there was wood. And those 2 choices are still the first 2 choices, the first 2 options that a muskie angler has in the day. A Suick Thriller was one of my best baits in the 70s. It's still one of my best baits today. So I am a big fan of Suick. And so let me pass you off to the second member of our team, Mr. Brent Boatside. Brent is the owner of Fish NV Guide Service. He's a Muskies Canada Vice President. He's a muskie and multi-species guide. He's the host of Setting the Hook Television and a really nice guy. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Brent Boatside.
Thanks, John. It's a real pleasure to be here with you and Lisa today. And a big thanks to Suick for putting this on. A little bit about myself. As you mentioned, I've been a host of a show called Setting the Hook. We have most of those episodes are now on YouTube. It's called Setting the Hook with Brent Boatside there. I've had lots of articles published in places like our release journal, the Muskies Canada Release Journal, and some local publications here. This time of year, I do a lot of fishing seminars. Very fortunate to do stuff at the Toronto Boat Show, the Musky Odyssey over the years. This year, I'll be hosting the seminars at the Musky Odyssey, president by Muskies Canada, and yeah, multi-species guide. Of course, muskies, of course, are right at the top of the list there. I'm also a salmon guide on Lake Ontario, and you know what? I've been throwing Suicks a long time. I started musky fishing back late 80s and became a member of Muskies Canada in 1990. And one of the reasons I throw so many Suicks is I have confidence in them. A few years back, we had 30 fish on our boat in June. 25 came on this one bait, this nighthawk here. Reason it got thrown so much, we got a fish on the first day, so it went back out the second day. Got a fish on the second day, it went back out the third day. So it's a bait that we have lots of confidence in and absolutely love throwing them.
Fantastic. The third member of our team, Lisa Goodyear. Lisa is a woman who is good at so many things beyond musky fishing. She can fix anything. She can build anything. I am a certified technical idiot. My friend Brent will say is technically challenged. So our technical expert for the program and producer of this broadcast is Lisa Goodyear. And Lisa started out as my student, my protege 7 years ago. And she has grown into my teacher. So very talented lady, Lisa Goodyear.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, so I am a guide at the Ottawa Musky Factory, and I'm also involved in Ottawa Fish School. I don't like to tell too many people that I'm out there fishing for bait. I am also a member of Muskies Canada, and I presented several Musky Odysseys and shows and online presentations. And I'm very passionate about teaching people proper handling techniques when it comes to musky. So I also volunteer at Bluefish Canada, which is a charity dedicated to was on his show. I also filmed another new show called Get Hooked, which will be coming out later this year. I'm a Shimano field staffer, and I'm a very proud member of Team Suick.
All right. So without further ado, let's get to Fish That Tell Stories. The idea behind this episode is we're going to show you pictures or videos of fish that represent epiphany moments in our own personal learning and development as guides, or that identify critical elements of behavior or tactics. There's some key learning point behind them. And so without further ado, let's go to fish number one, Lisa. All right. You know, when I put out an ad for this, I said we'd show spectacular pictures, and this is an absolutely terrible picture, but the important from 2000. But the important part of this is if you look at the bottom of the fish, you can see a thin white line. That is a transmitter that was placed in this fish for the first telemetry study that we did on the Ottawa River going back to 1994. So this fish was called Bertha, and the picture of Bertha that you're looking at is my childhood fishing buddy, Eddie Lalonde. We recaptured this fish in 2000, 6 years after it was tagged. The fish was 47.5 inches when we caught it. She was 50.5 inches in 2000. So growing 3 inches in 6 years. Very slow growth for larger fish in the north. The lesson behind this fish for you all is that fish follow predictable seasonal patterns of movement and can be found in the same locations for the most part, year after year after year for their whole life. They spawn in the same place. They spend their summer on a summer home range, and it's the same home range, wherever that is, year after year. So after spawning and the recuperation period, fish are moving to their summer home range. How do you use this as someone who hunts? Keep logs of fish that you come in contact with and fish that you catch. Even if you don't see that fish or recapture that fish, there's a good chance that fish is near where you captured it at the same time of year. Not all fish, something else that came out of that telemetry study for us is not all fish live the same lifestyle at all. We identified 3 different groups of fish. We had fish that spent almost the entire year living shallow. We had fish that lived deep for almost the entire year. And we had a 3rd group of fish that shared both the shallow and deep water. And so you have different tactical options as an angler, fishing shallow and deep. In truth, I make my living fishing shallow almost exclusively, and I'm much more of a caster. I prefer casting much more than trolling, but probably the biggest fish in any system is a deep water fish. It's way easier to make a living off of eating schools of bait fish or catfish off the bottom in our river, #1 fish that muskies go after, than it is being an ambush hunter in the shallow. So enough about fish #1. Brent Bocek, what do you have for us?
Well, we got another fish, at least, that's going to pop up on the screen here. And I was just trying to remember what order I had them in. But this fish here, it kind of taught me something. We're talking about the fish that tell stories. When I do seminars during the wintertime, quite often I'll talk about starting strong, finishing strong. And part of starting strong is having your bait hit the water and getting moving right away. And what I like to talk about is when a fish hears a splash, it's going to look up, right? It's going to take a look, see what it is. If your bait just hits the water, if you're throwing blades, it just kind of falls, without getting them rolling right away. Or if you're throwing a jerk bait and it hits the water, and you don't start working it right away, that fish is going to lose interest. It's that splash originally that's going to catch your attention. You can get a reaction strike out of it as well that way. I was fishing on a new body of water here that I hadn't really fished before, and it's a river system. We're floating down the river, we're casting away, and all of a sudden I hear a splash behind me. So instinctively, I just turned around, fired that cast out. I didn't know if it was a bass or what it was. Could have been a bass, a pike, or musky feeding. Something made a splash. I heard the sound, fired that cast out. As soon as my bait hit the water, I got 2 or 3 pumps in, and this fish hit. So I started strong as soon as that bait hit the water, but was paying attention to your surroundings, you're hearing stuff. You know what? I heard that fish feeding, turned around, made that cast, able to catch the fish. So it's really important to pay attention to your surroundings. And it's, just the same as a fish hearing that splash and looking up to see what it was. You hear that splash out in the water, fire a cast out there because you never know what will happen.
Fantastic. Really something that I found, Brent, in fishing shallow is a really good way to catch a big fish is to land on its head. A lot of fish run away from that splash. Musky is like the Marines. They go to where the action is. They rule the water. There's nothing that they're afraid of. And so when you land on a fish's head, you get a reaction strike. Even big fish, experienced fish will make a mistake on that reaction strike. So really good way to catch a big fish. Lisa's got a terrific video for us right now. Lisa's got a really terrific video to share with us right now. What do you got, Lisa?
I'll show you the video. I do apologize. The audio is not great on it, but we can talk about it a bit afterwards. Basically what it is my worst nightmare as a guide. I threw 1 cast for the day to demo a bait, and I caught the fish, which is obviously not what I'm going for, but the guys were really great sports about it, and we had a blast. And thankfully we managed another muskie later in the day as well. I want to talk about a couple of things in the video that could have been done better and what I learned from that. So I'll share it with you real quick here.
All right, so what's your trick here? I've seen them just kind of glide. I see how they work.
Yeah, so the whole point of this thing is that it's a dying or your fish presentation, right?
Yeah.
So when the fish is dying, it tries to swim down and then comes like up to the surface. You give it a pull. You see how it just rises up slowly?
Yeah.
Moves around really erratically.
Yeah.
So pull, reel. Pull, reel. And the reason you want to reel fast and slack is because they hit the pause, right? So you pull and then you put the rod jig up so you're ready to slam it once you did it.
So very similar. A little slower than the perfect stick bait. Yes.
This is a nice thing
Oh!
about
Yes!
Here,
Take it! Take it! Take it! Oh, it's at the end. I'll get the net. Holy! Yeah, baby! Yeah, baby! That is awesome. Is this Frida? Yeah.
I don't know. Let's see.
Oh, Frida! Need the net.
She's barely hooked. Let's see.
That's it. Oh, barely hooked. Get him in the net! Net! Oh.
That's my fault. Puller.
Scoop him. Yeah.
That's an awesome video.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so it was pretty cool to see that eat inside the boat for those guys. They obviously really enjoyed that. A couple things that could have been done a little bit differently. Obviously, that day I actually had 4 people in my boat, 2 fathers and sons, which is max capacity, and I usually only do that with experienced anglers. So you can see I'm stuck between my seat and someone at the back, and there's already people at the front. So the one thing I with a muskie, you're thrashing around the side of the boat there. It just gives way more opportunity for them to get the leverage and for them to get off. And pulling the fish the way I did, that is something I would never recommend anyone do, because the more you turn that fish, the more opportunity the hook has to come out if you pull on the wrong angle. So don't plant your fish, don't plant your feet. If the fish wants to swim this way, you run up that way, keep your rod ahead of the fish, so that you're always got tension on your line, but you're staying ahead of the fish. And just make sure you communicate with your net partner. Hey, I'm coming around this side. Communication with your net partner is super important. In that case there, he did the best he could with what he was given, but it was a great experience with those guys. And the one thing I was trying to explain to him before I got caught off by the muskie is that one of my favorite things about the thriller is, on that day, for instance, we had blue skies, high pressure, no wind. So we had decided to slow things down a little bit, and you saw in the video how that pause was really what triggered that fish. But on other days, when the fish are super active, you can work those baits really fast. So for me, as a guide, it's super versatile, easy for people to work.
Well done, Lisa. I just mentioned that that's not the first time that's happened to you, and that happens to me regularly as well. In fact, 2 years ago, Lisa and I were both demonstrating how to use the jerkbait, how to use the Suick thriller to guess. 20 miles apart on the river, we both caught 48-inch fish, same time of day, same first cast, beautiful fish. So when a peak is on, when the fish are on, a peak works all over. And that pause, that's really, really big in musky fishing. Fish hit on the pause, so make sure you pause. I'll go on to my fish number 2 if you want to pull it up for me, please, Lisa. This is a fish from the 1980s. I am holding it vertically, and it is a 40-pound muskie, my first 40-pound muskie. Interestingly, the second one that I put in the net was 1 week after this one, in basically the same area. The lesson behind this fish that I'm going to tell you a little bit more about is that muskies are creatures of the bottom. From the telemetry studies that we have done throughout Eastern Ontario, muskies spend 2/3 of their time on or near the bottom. And they're basically inactive or neutral when they're on the bottom. So you need to take advantage of fishing on the bottom. There's certain times and conditions, I said 2/3 of the time, where muskies are even more likely to spend time on the bottom, and your bigger fish spend more time on the bottom than anybody else. So if you're not fishing the bottom, you should be. This specific fish, we lucked into a pattern in the early 80s of trolling baits. Remember, we didn't have technology back then. Best we had was some charts. And so we picked a 15 to 18 foot depth that we really liked for a lot of reasons. And we ran baits that ran basically 14 to 16 feet on a long cast. So without knowing really the reasons behind why we were having success, we just did over and over again. So much so that we didn't even go learn anything new for a lot of years. I mean, the pattern worked. We were catching more muskies than we'd ever had. So we just stuck with it for a lot of years. A comment that Dr. Stephen Cook, one of my favorite research biologists, made is that angling success is largely dictated by how close you get your presentation to a fish's mouth, no matter what species you're fishing for. So We just happened to put our bait near where a lot of fish were at the time. And that's the reason behind it. And so if you're not fishing the bottom, you should be. When I troll, I always have one of my offerings. I try to run it 3 feet, 2, 3, 4 feet off of the bottom. I try and clip the bait every now and then. I told you earlier, I'm a caster at heart. I'm a shallow water angler, and I spend most of my time in, say, 3 to 9 feet of water. My presentations in there, regardless of what I'm throwing, are still relatively close to a fish's mouth. So fish the bottom, no matter where you are. Second comments on this fish, I wanted to comment on vertical holds. A controversial topic in the modern day. Whenever I see someone post a fish vertically online, the internet army goes to work and people crap all over them. Some people gently try and explain to people why they shouldn't do that. So there's two kinds of people that post fish vertically on the internet in the modern day. People who are kids or people who are new to musky fishing and don't know better. I mean, most of us want to look after our fish. And the second kind is people who just don't want to be told what to do. And so there's not much you can do to fix that. However, if you care, the first article that was published on the damage that you do and the mortality associated with that damage on vertical holds was published by a biologist named Mike Butler, I think in 1994, 1996. We'll say, and there's 5 different places where you damage a big fish. And from those old days of holding fish like that, if they shake in your hand, you actually hear you hear a little noise that you know now is really bad. So if you care, the more musky, you're only as good as your fishery. And so handling those fish really well is of utmost importance. Up here in Canada, we don't stock muskies. We didn't stock anywhere in Canada last year. We haven't stocked anywhere for a few years. All naturally reproducing populations. So in the States, the last I heard, my data's a little out of date, but Ohio grew a muskie, 48-inch muskie in 5 years. That goes back a number of years ago. A 48-inch muskie up here is closer to 20 years. When you take that out of the system, you can't replace it. You have no idea of the balance that you're throwing off with it. So handle your fish with care. You'll catch more. Your kids will catch more. Everybody will catch more. And as my friend Gord Pizer likes to say, in the end, we all get the musky fishery that we deserve. So I will pass off Brent Boat to Brent, my partner Brent, for fish number 2 in his series of very educational pictures. What do you got, Brent?
Well, we all know that walleye guys fish rocky points, smallmouth guys fish rocky points. Very, very rarely do I see musky guys fishing rocky points, at least the places I fish. Why that is, I don't know. These rocky points, fish use them at different times of the day. Walleye will be in there at night, smallies might be in there during the day. Well, so those fish are coming in there to feed. When I get overcast, if you can see in this picture here, it's overcast, guys. It's a bit of a wind, not much wind, but there's a bit of a breeze there. There's actually more wind than what you can see in the photo there, just because we're a little bit protected there. But when you get a windswept point with overcast, John, you're going to love this because you're a shallow water guy. Those big muskies will go into that shallow water to feed. When the wind's coming through those rocks, crayfish are getting disorientated, minnows are getting disorientated, smallmouth, rock bass, sunfish are coming in to feed on those, and then the muskies coming in to feed as well on what's coming in to feed on the smaller bait. So don't overlook those points. One thing I've noticed though is when a muskie's up on those points, very rarely do I ever get a follow. No, you got to start your cast strong, get that bait rolling right away. Always, always, always make a boatside maneuver. But on these spots, I find that these fish are up there to feed, and you're going to get hit right away. Very rarely do I ever see a fish follow or get a fish on a figure 8 or a boatside maneuver on these spots. So when you get these spots where fish, they don't necessarily live there, but they're only coming in there to feed, make sure that you start strong and the middle of your cast is strong as well, because they're not going to follow. They're up there to feed, and you're going to get hit if they're up there. If you take a look at the next photo, Lisa, pull up that. So this fish is caught in the exact same area a day apart. It's a little bit windier here. We still have overcast, but if you had 360 that photo, you'd see the same point in the background. So a lot of fish will come up. You know, in 2 days we got 4 fish between 40 and 44 inches off of this one point when the wind was coming in and when we had overcast right in the middle of the day. So don't overlook those points and make sure you start strong, because those fish are up there to feed.
Fish where the wind blows. Really good advice, Brent. Well done. Lisa.
We're just gonna quickly answer a couple of questions if you guys are good with that.
Sure.
We've got some good ones. I'll start with the first one. I think it was from my presentation. Hi, Anzej. Glad you could make it. He's wondering, do those baits have rattles? And I'm pretty sure he was talking about the Thriller. So no, they don't. Now, the one thing with the Suick that surprises a lot of people, firstly, it displaces a lot of water when it moves. But every time you pull it, those hooks are slamming on the bottom of the bait, and it makes a surprising amount of noise underwater. And the second question we have here, I think it was for your presentation, Brent. Let's see if we can find it. It was from David. He said he's been told to let any topwater or surface bait sit in place and count to 30.
Actually, I think Dave and I've had this conversation before.
Any thoughts on this?
Sorry. I think Dave and I have had this conversation before. I've had the pleasure of fishing with Dave before, and I'm a big believer in getting that bait moving right away. If you've cast it out and let a surface bait sit for a bit and you've had success on it, keep doing it. Myself, I like to get that bait moving, though. I just think you're going to get more of a reaction strike when you get that bait moving right away. Fish hears a splash. If it looks up, if you're, as John was saying, landing that bait right on the head of a muskie, you want to get that bait moving so it looks natural. Things land on the water and sit there for a bit. I've seen frogs just sitting on the water around lily pads and whatnot. But I like to get my bait moving. What do you guys think?
I'm a get your bait moving kind of guy as well, Brent. That technique that was just mentioned about letting your bait sit, I know that works really well for a lot of bass fishermen. I know, again, if you're having success with it, then you should keep doing it. Absolutely.
I actually read an interesting article last year about a system with a lot of frogs, and they were finding that the muskies were actually sitting facing the weed edge, waiting for something to jump in on the edge to react to that right away. So that was kind of an interesting thought. All right, so my next video is on the same note for top water here. I might have a little bit of problem with my video. I got a bit of a technical issue here, but we'll give it a shot. See if it'll play. All right, let's see. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, let's give it a shot.
I was doing the turn. Yeah. Just like you said. I'm getting their shots.
Brent, are you seeing that video play?
Oh.
Not right now, no.
Yes.
No. Lisa, I think you've got connectivity problems from your end. Maybe if you want to shut that down and we'll talk about the video. This being our first broadcast, it's a learning curve for us and a chance to iron out any of the difficulties that we have. We obviously have some problems with the strength of the internet where Lisa is. We promised to take care of that for our next episode. Lisa, do you want to tell us about that video that you just played and what the key points, learning points out of it were?
For sure, yeah. Did you see any of it at all or no?
Not really.
Not really.
So basically, weed edge, topwater bait coming into the boat. And my client that day, really special client of mine, he's been coming back to me for several years in a row. He was always a troller and he wanted to get into casting, and it's pretty admirable. I mean, and the guy's in his 70s and he's out there hugging musky baits. It's unbelievable. And he'd never caught a topwater fish. And we had a day where they were absolutely firing. And at that point, he'd missed 3 or 4 fish already on topwater. The fish follows in behind us, just at the last minute, shows up just as he starts to turn in towards the boat, eats the bait. And as I see a lot of time, people's reaction when that happens all of a sudden is the rod's up in the air. And so there, okay, yeah. So the fish was thrashing wildly on the surface, and at that point it has the leverage to spit the hook really easily. So topwater to me sometimes gets a bad rep for people saying it's a low hookup percentage bait. But from my personal experience, I see 3 mistakes that are made that kind of contribute to it being a low percentage hookup. And if you change these 3 little things, it'll definitely help you. First and foremost, and the hard part, especially if you're newer to musky fishing, is not reacting to that wild splash or boil that happens. I see so many times where there's a splash and then there's an immediate hook set and the lure's flying across the boat. So you really want to wait and feel the weight of the fish before you set the hook. That's the number 1 most important thing. The hook set itself is super, super important that you do not set the hook up into the top part of the fish's mouth. You want to go hard to the side. And then the next key part is keeping the fish low in the water. You don't want to have your rod up, like I said. So in this video, you can actually hear me say to him, rod down, rod down, rod down, I think 3 or 4 times before he says, oh, I guess I should have kept my rod down. No.
If at first you don't succeed,
Sorry, John?
Thought you were finished there. I was gonna say, if at first you don't succeed, try doing what your guide told you in the first place.
Yeah, and the nice thing for Rich, we did get some redemption that day. In fact, we ended up with 3 more fish over the next 2 days, to the point where he was actually starting to go a little bit squirrely, and we got this really funny photo that I like to share of him. So, so we got and he got his topwater.
Coming to the casting addiction for muskies late in life, all of our addictions are different, but we're all severely addicted. We admit it. Absolutely. If you want to pull up fish number 3 in my series, please, Lisa. All right. This is Lorinda. My friend Lorinda holding the first 50-inch muskie that she ever caught. So the learning points behind this are boatside skills and management is the best thing you can do to improve your muskie game, and the best thing we can teach you to improve your muskie game. So it's something that we really focus on. When Lorinda showed up to fish with me in the first time, she told me that she and her partner had 24 muskies up the previous week on a different body of water. And my first question was, if you had 24 muskies up, what do you want to go out with me for? Not very often I get 24 muskies up, in a day, sometimes over a weekend, but it's truly a rare event. And so she confided in me that of the 24, they went 0 for 24. In your personal learning curve for muskie, often there are little tiny epiphany moments that just move you up to the next level in terms of what you catch and your overall production rate. So that boat side, the last 8 or 10 or 15 feet of your cast, the most important part of your cast. It's where you catch fish, where you lose fish, and where you miss the opportunities often to catch your biggest fish. So learning to finish well, learning to figure eight well, absolutely key. Your awareness and what you're looking for at the side of the boat, really critical in terms of what you're going to catch. We could do a whole show on the figure eight, like Vince Lombardi talking about seminar for an entire day on an option play for a quarterback, on one play. And so on how to figure eight well, again, could be an entire program. It's a whole lot of little things. I'll give a shout out to Doug Wegner if you want to learn. Doug Wegner finishes really well. It has a lot of videos out there of them catching fish on figure eights. The one thing I say to people that's going to help you finish well is big circles. In the old days, when rods were shorter, we used to teach people to do circles, not figure eights, because big fish can't turn sharp circles. And we're fishing for the biggest muskies where we are. We're lucky that way. And so when you do big circles, you keep a fish engaged in the bait. When you do sharp circles, often you go past that fish, it just appears. As rods got longer and longer, we caught more and more fish at the side of the boat. I'm fishing with 9.5 and 10-foot rods myself. I can get 2 big circles out of a figure eight. You'll see that in some of the Wegner videos if you go and look them up. So best thing you can do right now to up your game, up your boat side management, your boat side skills.
We got a good question for you here, John, from Steven. Wondering how to use top water on the 8. This year he had his first top water follow. He put the bait under the water and the fish took off.
Okay. I am a make your bait dive. So I bring a top water bait to the boat and then I dive it down. If you look at bait fish trying to escape a muskie, they do generally one of 2 things. They go to the bottom, or you see them coming to the top. And so we see moon eyes, we see bait fish jumping and skipping out of the water. And we see them just jumping. I know if I see that bait fish skipping out of the water, when its eyes are really big and it's got the fear of muskie in its mouth, there's fish chasing it. So my personal preference is to take the bait down and to finish the top water cast underwater. That said, you do have a good point on keeping a bait on the surface. The bait on the surface is what attracted the muskie to begin with. I encourage people to simply alter something slightly. A change of direction is one of the first things that is a trigger for a fish that's in a follow. And so that fish engaged you, got into hunting mode with your bait on the surface. A simple change in direction also can be really good. Maybe taking your bait underwater is step 2 or step 3 of offering the fish something different, trying to initiate that strike. So yeah, you know what? Fish run away from you at the side of the boat lots of times, no matter what you do. And so let us know if that works, if that continues in the future, and if you get one at the side of the boat, underwater at the side of the boat.
Just to add to that, when a muskie's following a surface bait in, it doesn't know what it is. It just knows it's something it wants to eat. It's used to things being on the surface and diving down in that. So myself, I also go underneath, when I bring a surface bait in, say I'm throwing the night walker, I'll bring it to the side of the boat and I'll go into my figure eight and I'll, put it down in the water column as well. So.
And sometimes too, if you can see a follow from a distance, the other thing that I'll try is actually changing direction before you get to the boat, before you have to come down and dive into your corner.
That's a really key piece of information you just passed on, Lisa. Trying to making an adjustment with your bait, whether to speed up, to change direction, when you're 20 feet off the boat, will initiate that strike away from the boat. When that fish gets close to the boat, there's a lot of things to distract it. Your electric motor, your chartreuse hat, the big bright logo on your jersey, talking too loud. you know, a lot of times that doesn't matter, but to some fish it really does. And so initiating a strike 20 feet away from the boat is better than having to deal with it at the side of the boat in the figure eight a lot of times. Nice point, Lisa. All right.
Brent, are you up?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Well, you look at that. So we're talking about fish that tell stories. Every time we encounter a muskie, we should learn something from it. It's telling us something, whether it's following, if it's coming in fast, if it's coming in slow, the direction it came. Did it come from underneath the boat? Did it come from away from the boat? Did it come from the side? Every time we see a fish, it's telling us a story. So it's up to us to put that story together. So this fish here in particular, I was fishing up on the West Arm Lake Nipissing with my buddy Craig Battle during a Muskies Canada event with the Hamilton chapter. We got up there on the Thursday, and we went out fishing on the Thursday. Had a little incident on the Thursday with a real good fish that I missed. I'm always talking about finishing or starting strong and finishing strong, especially when I'm doing a fishing seminar. I talk about that all the time. Craig gets snagged. I make a cast out, and I said to Craig, goes, "Oh, I'm snagged." I said, "Okay, well, I just started a cast. Let me, I'm smart, right? I'm going to finish my cast." I said, "Craig, let me just finish my cast first." So I bring it in. I go into a half-hearted or kind of a lazy boatside maneuver. And as soon as I looked down, about a 46-inch fish came cruising in. Looked like he wanted to eat, but I had already screwed it up, right? And Craig looks at me and goes, "I thought you were going to finish your cast." So lesson learned. So we've seen a bunch of fish the next day as well. Didn't see anything on the Saturday. Sunday morning, we have breakfast. Everybody else is heading home. Everybody's been up there 2 to 5, 6 days, and they're heading home. And Craig and I had talked about this ahead of time. We spend too much money on equipment, on gas, accommodations, all the effort we put into chasing these fish. Why am I going to leave the place at 8 o'clock in the morning and get home at 1 o'clock in the afternoon if I can fish till noon and get home at 6 or 7? So we decided we were going to fish till noon. As luck would have it, we really didn't see anything that morning until 11:30. And this fish, we're casting up towards a rock shoal. I was throwing a 10-inch weighted Suick, in the Nighthawk color, my favorite color. A friend of mine, Brian Burial, put me onto that a bunch of years ago, that color. And I'm working it back to the boat, and from underneath my feet, underneath the boat, this fish appears. She comes up really slow on an angle. So that tells me two things, right? That tells me a bunch of stuff right there. The fish was deep. It seen my bait and slowly came up towards it, right? It wasn't in a really aggressive mood because of the speed it came. Followed into a figure eight. And as that fish sank, so did my heart. I'm like, oh, man, we just seen the biggest fish of the weekend, and we just missed it. So we made a couple of quick casts, and I said, Craig and I talked about it. We said, you know what? Let's leave this fish alone. Let's not bother it. Let's come back to it, see if we can catch it. So that was about 11:30. We went and fished another spot or two, kind of quickly, came back. And this fish told us the story, right? Told us it came from the deeper water. It wasn't really aggressive, but it was interested, but it wasn't super aggressive. So, John, you can describe the Jersey retrieve in a minute here. So what I did was we get back to the spot, sitting in about 13 feet of water, and I see bait on the bottom. And it clicks under me. That fish is here trying to eat that bait down there. So I put on the Cisco-colored curly Sue. I put that on, and I see Craig put on a shallow running bait, thinking this is perfect. Craig just gave me a better chance to catch that fish. Sorry, Craig. But I throw this out. I always talk about starting strong, getting your bait rolling right away. Well, I wanted this bait to get down about 13 feet. I wanted to get right down by the bottom because that fish came up on an angle, right? It told us the story. Cast out, let that count down about 10, start a real slow retrieve. And as I was casting, I thought, Jersey retrieve. And it's something John talked about when I was fishing with him a couple years ago. It just kind of clicked in my head. Working that bait real slow, so just the tail's working. Got it down close to bottom, and that fish hit about halfway back. And we're very fortunate to come back and be able to catch that fish. It was a real nice fish. But that fish told us a lot. It told us the story when it came in. So anytime you see a fish that fish is not that we catch every fish we see, but they are catchable, right? But they're telling us something. If they're coming in fast and aggressive, they're on the hunt. If they're coming in slow, they're curious, still might want to eat. But I think by going back when we fished that fish the second time, when we went back at it, we fished it slow because that fish wasn't really aggressive, right? So I got that bait coming right close to that fish, and that's when she was able to eat it with the mood that she was in. So, yeah, John, you want to tell us a little bit about the Jersey retrieve there?
Sure. I actually picked the same bait that you were holding, a curly soup bait. I've caught a lot of fish on. And so Jersey retrieve was taught to me. I've guided a lot of guys out of New Jersey, and they have 6 or 8 prime musky waters in the state and a whole lot of fishermen. So somebody said to me that you basically know the fish by name on the body of water. They see so much pressure and so many lures. They just get used to what you're doing. It's really hard to get to initiate a strike. As musky anglers, we have one gear, maybe 2, fast and super fast. And so your fish, I mentioned earlier, spend 2/3 of their time on or near the bottom. That's a negative or a neutral state. And so to take advantage of getting your bait close to a fish, which is what you need to do for negative or neutral fish, we employ the Jersey retrieve. So, you can do so many things with your soft plastic. Guys on Lake St. Clair like to fish it vertically with, covering a lot of the water column, being very aggressive with it, using it, same retrieve that you would use for a jerk bait a lot of the time. That's a common retrieve. Something I like to do that I don't see many people do is what we call the Jersey retrieve. And that's cast the bait out, let it sink down close to the bottom, hold your rod up, stick your belly out, drop your jaw, and just reel really slowly. And you let the tail of the bait do the work. Negative and neutral fish are not aggressive. They won't travel to engage a bait. However, if you're within 1, 2, 3 feet of a fish, which you are when you're going slow, and it looks like a vulnerable presentation, maybe you will catch them. So really good technique on your tough days of fishing. And we'll talk about that topic a little bit more in more detail on subsequent episodes. But that Jersey retrieve, something you should have in your article. Don't fish fast all the time. If what you're doing isn't working, you got to do something different. Going slow, musky anglers have a tough time with it. It's a key presentation piece of your arsenal. So Jersey retrieve.
We answer. I see a question on here I think we should answer right now, if you guys don't mind. Martin's
Sure.
asking, he says he's having trouble casting Suick out.
Good question.
So you cut out there, Lisa. There it is. Yeah, he's having trouble casting Suick out. He's asking if a weighted one would help casting it. He's had medium, heavy, and heavy power rods. What cast light do you guys in general use with Suicks? Myself, I haven't really gotten to that trend of those longer rods. When I first started musky fishing, I had a 5'9" Fenwick, and I used that for blades. I used that for jerk baits. I used it for everything. And now quite often I use an 8.6 Fenwick now. But the biggest thing I find when you're casting baits, say a 9-inch Suick isn't really that heavy. When you come back, you'll feel your rod kind of load up. As soon as it loads up, use that energy to help cast your rod. And if you have your reel cranked down too tight, if you have there's a little knob on the side there, which tightens your spool on your reel. If you loosen that off a little bit, it should. I have mine loosened all the way off, actually. Then I just use my thumb to kind of feather it. And that comes through experience, of course. Do you have any tips for catching those, John or Lisa?
Absolutely, Martin. You have you've been experiencing a problem that we have all the time, and so especially if you're fishing with floating baits. Myself, I like a weighted Suick. I like the bait to be down. I like it to hang in the water column, especially on my pauses, even to let it ride up. But with non-weighted baits, especially throwing them out, try throwing with the wind. So usually in a boat, we have different presentation options and have people fishing out both sides. I might think the weed edge or in the weeds is the A place, but I still got somebody casting out on the B side because we're not always right. So with your lighter baits, your baits that have trouble in the wind, make sure that your boat control, a key element of putting fish in the boat, puts you so that you're casting downwind or at the very least crosswind. When you're going against the wind, really difficult to cast and achieve any distance. And as guides, we hate undoing birds' nests. And so, just for our own preservation, having people cast lighter baits, having people cast Suicks, especially lighter Suicks, with the wind is a way so that they make a lot longer casts. And your guide, as guides, we don't go crazy undoing your constant bird's nests. So hope that helps, Martin. Thanks for the question.
That's why we always carry up the rod.
Yeah. We got another question that kind of ties into that one. So Stephen's asking, for a new Suick fisherman, can you explain the difference between the weighting system? I know there's adjustable weight system along with weighted and non-weighted, as well as your personal preferences.
Personal preference, I'm fishing over top of weeds that are really high. Then a non-weighted is great because you can kind of keep it, in that first 1.5 feet of the water column, right over top of those weeds. And when you go over those pockets is when you'll get hit. But if I'm fishing deeper on the edge, I love the weighted Suicks, and the new weights you can adjust them, right? I like to put the heavier weights at the front so I get a little bit more nosedive on it. And that's personal preference, right?
I just happen to have a brand new Franken Suick here with the weight bag that comes with it attached. So if you can look in here, there's a whole bunch of different weight options. The bait comes weighted. Nice weight at the front, nice weight in the middle. It's perfectly weighted as it is in the world that I like to fish in. This is actually Lisa's favorite lure in the fall, and I guess probably mine the last lot of years. We catch a lot of fish on the Franken Suicks later in the year when it's a good time to upsize your baits. The tail, bending the tail down will make your bait dive deeper. I love baits. I love weighted baits more than I love the buoyant floating baits, unless I'm fishing shallow and in weeds. And so the reason for that is, especially in colder water later in the year, fish are a lot slower. And so that pause that we've talked about a couple times on this show becomes even more relevant. And so bringing this bait along on the on 3 or 4 pulls and letting it pause, it's getting down 5 or 6 feet, the way that it's weighted at that point with the bend in the tail that I put, and it's got a very slow rise up to the surface. And one thing the Suick does when it rises up to the surface is there's a little bit of shudder and often a spin. And so one of the most beautiful visual strikes that I can get in my boat is watching a Suick float up from 3, 4, 5, 6 feet slowly and float all the way up. And it's going to take 6, 8, 10 seconds a lot of the time, depending on your waiting to do it. But especially around bait fish, especially in cold water and later in the year, that pause, that bait rising up, that's a big, big strike initiator. So one of the reasons why we love Franken Suicks in the fall, the bag of weights that comes with a Franken Suick is so that you can fish deep. If you want, you can swap these out and you can fish this bait down 15, 16, 18, 20 feet and work for fish that in there. If that's where you're seeing bait fish, if that's where your technology is showing you where to go, you have those options as well. Mike Kadura, a guy who's been very successful as a guide for the Ottawa River Musky Factory, he likes weighting the front of his bait, and that's a technique that he employs later in the fall, specifically 10 to 15 feet of water. So hope that answers your question. A lot of different options for presentations there.
Yeah. The one other thing I like to do every now and then, just with the regular weighted Suick, like say a 10 or a 9-inch weighted one, in the fall, sometimes I'll put a weight in front of my leader. So you take the rubber core sinkers, take the rubber out and squeeze the weight around it. And when you give it a pull, that's bait will still rise up, but that weight will actually let it hang in one spot where it actually becomes like a neutral buoyant. And in the fall, as you guys know, that hang time can be real key. So just a little spin on that with the weights and that, you still get that little bit of a rise with that weight on the leader, but then it just stops it. So it actually just sits still for as long until you give it its next pull.
Yeah. And your speed and your length of the pull as well is also a big factor in the depth it's going to run at. And so for example, just so we have an idea of what bait for what, that fish that we were showed the video at the beginning of that ate that Suick right inside of the boat, that was a 9-inch weighted Suick. And you saw that it was just, 8 inches below the surface with the way that we were working it. Whereas I could work it higher, I could work it faster. So like I said, they're very versatile in that sense.
Fantastic. All good points, team. We are a verbose lot, I have to say, and the three of us can sit and talk muskies for many hours, but for the purposes of these broadcasts, we're going to try and limit what we present to you to about 60 minutes, which is coming up fairly quickly. So it may be a good time for us to touch on where Suick is going to be, and the shows that are coming up, and maybe our own social media. What do you think?
Just one quick question. Just answer one more here. Dave's asking if we tee our hooks. Do you guys tee your hooks on your Suicks? And if you do, why? What are you gaining through that?
I don't. Personally, don't. On some of my crankbaits, my trolling baits, I do, but on my Suicks, I've never teed them. You, Brett?
I can't say not usually on a Suick. No, like you say, trolling baits I do. Just it saves a lot with the hook rash. How about yourself, Don?
I am not a big fan of the tee, and I don't do it at all on Suicks. The 3 hooks spread out, the 3 hooks on the 3 barbs on a treble give you a higher opportunity for a strike. If you look at a teed hook, there's a lot of times where 2 of the hooks are flat against the bait, and you have one that's protruding down. Before you tee your hooks, you just have more opportunity to get a hook point into your fish. So not something I do, not something that causes heavy damage in the Suick. When your Suicks get worn out, it's a good thing. Generally, it means that you're catching fish on them. And, I hand people baits that are absolutely destroyed at different times. I fish Suicks until you can't fish them anymore. There's something about that wooden bait that the fish love, and they will continue to love until it doesn't work anymore. So, don't be afraid of getting marks on your bait. It's about the hook set, about maximizing the hook set, one of the weak points that we have in the boat. And so
this one right here, I can work it for about half an hour, and then it gets so waterlogged that it won't work anymore. But in that half hour, quite often I am able to catch fish on it.
Yeah.
That's a warrior. It looks like you've caught a few fish on that one, Brent. Well
done.
Yeah.
There's a good story behind that one, but anyways, yes.
Maybe for another episode. What do you
For
think?
sure. Yeah. As far as coming up for myself, the Thursday and Friday, January 23rd and 24th, I'll be at the Toronto International Boat Show, the largest indoor boat show in North America, and I'll be doing 2 musky seminars there. So that's all I got going on in January other than ice fishing and this.
Yeah, Brent said before when we got together before the broadcast that if we weren't doing the Suick seminar series this evening, he would be out fishing. And it was a joke, but it was serious. that boy would be out fishing if we weren't here tonight. He's got the addiction bad.
So I'll be out tomorrow night.
Lisa and I are doing presentations for the Ottawa and Barrie chapters of Muskies Canada. That's next Monday night. It's an online presentation. It's interactive. If you're a Muskies Canada member, it'll be filmed and go in the Muskies Musky TV link on your Muskies Canada page. I guess that's what's coming up in the near future. How about shows stateside that Suick is going to be at? Do you have a list of those, Brent?
Lisa has a list of them. She's going to put up right there. Just like magic.
Wow.
So we got
What's
January 17th to 19th in the Minnesota. Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
In
I'm sorry,
Chicago,
I can't read that.
Oh, you Brent.
Chicago,
Oh, you Brent.
17th to the 19th. Then next up is Milwaukee in February, Minnesota in March, and then actually, well, almost the same week in Wisconsin as well.
Fantastic. Lots of opportunities to say hi to Mike, to say hi to the Suick team, to the Southern Suick team. You got most of the Northern Suick team here now. I guess we want to say thank you very much for tuning in. If you're still out there, we'll look at the numbers of people, but it looks like this was a really well-attended event. So thanks for coming out. Thanks for still being here. Hope you learned something tonight. Maybe something this big will catch you this many more fish going forward. We hope so. On behalf of myself, John Anderson, Brent Bocek, and Lisa Goodyear, we'll look to see you all next month, February 3rd, at the second installment of the Suick Seminar Series. Thanks all.